On the 4th of April 2014, in Tres Passos, Rio Grande do Sul, 11-year-old Bernardo Boldrini. Tres Passos is a small interior town in the far northwest of Rio Grande do Sul. He had been told that morning he would travel with his stepmother to see a healer in the interior. He did not arrive at the healer. He did not return to the house. The question the case has carried since is not who killed him. It is who in 8 institutions was supposed to stop it and did not. The question is the Cascade. Between July 2013 and the 4th of April 2014, named adults at named desks received reports. A guardian counselor of the Conselho Tutelar visited the school. A pediatrician in town saw him for a chest infection. The family lawyer of his grandmother sent an email naming a former nanny as a witness. On the 24th of January 2014, Bernardo himself walked alone to the courthouse. He spoke with a prosecutor for around 40 minutes. The conversation was not entered into the record. 11 weeks later, he was dead. This channel is called the Quiet Hill. This is the case of the Boldrini Cascade. Chapter 1, Bernardo and his mother tongue. Bernardo Uglione Boldrini was born on the 6th of September 2002 at the Regional Reference Hospital in Santa Maria. He was the only child of his father's first marriage. His father was Leandro Boldrini, a dentist in Tres Passos with a private office on a central street. His mother was Graciele Ugulini from a nearby city, the daughter of a stable maternal family with a mother, a sister, and a cousin who would later all give depositions. Tres Passos sits in the Alto Uruguay region, around 490 kilometers by road from Porto Alegre. Soy and dairy, German and Italian settler names on the storefronts. One main square, one hospital, one courthouse. The kind of town in which the dentist and the pediatrician and the city judge will all be at the same children's birthday party on a Saturday. By the late 2000s, the marriage of Leandro and Odilene was, in the language the police inquiry but later used, conflituoso. Leandro had begun a relationship with Graciele Ugulini, a younger woman from the same region, a nursing technician. Odilene, according to depositions later given by family and friends, was aware of the relationship. She told her mother she was afraid. 5 days before her death, she went to the police in Tres Passos and filed a report that she had been threatened. The report was filed. It was not acted on before the morning of the 10th of February 2010. On that morning, Odilene drove to Leandro's dental office. She had a key. She was found inside alone with a single gunshot wound. The civil police inquiry concluded that she had taken her own life. The case was archived within months. Her mother, Jussara Marlene Uglione, never accepted the ruling. The inquiry was reopened in 2017 after Bernardo's death and archived again in April 2018. Leandro Boldrini has never been criminally charged with the death of Bernardo's mother. Chapter 2, the years 2010 to 2013. After Uglioni's death, Leandro married to Graciele. A daughter was born to them. The household became a four-person family in a town small enough but most of what happened inside it was witnessed at some room. Bernardo, by the accounts that would later appear in the case file, was treated as a problem to be managed. He was enrolled at Colégio Ipiranga, private school in Tres Passos. He saw a pediatrician in town. He had a godmother and an extended maternal family in Santa Maria who would visit him during school holidays. From the outside, the structure of his daily life looked like that of any other upper middle class boy in the interior. A uniform, a lunchbox, a backpack with his name written on the inside. What teachers, classmates, parents, and former nanny would later tell prosecutors was something different. By 2013, Bernardo was visibly thinner than in photographs from the year before. He was sometimes locked out of the house when his father was not home and sat on the curb with his backpack to wait. Classmates told their parents that there was a joke at school about Bernardo asking for snacks. The school coordinator, Simone Muller, and the school psychologist, Denise Asher, would later confirm in court that they had been aware of episodes of hunger. They had been aware of a lack of provided meals and of the boy describing his stepmother in distress terms. Neither of them filed any formal report with the Consejo Tutelar, the Municipal Child Protection Council, or with the Ministerial. In July 2013, a guardian counselor of the Consejo Tutelar, Nestor Weschenfelder, accompanied by a social worker, visited Colégio Ipiranga to interview Bernardo. The visit had followed an informal report from someone in the school community. The counselor's note from that day recorded that Bernardo seemed somewhat dejected, but did not report mistreatment. No formal file was opened. In November 2013, Bernardo was seen by a pediatrician in Tres Passos, Dr. Jose Roberto Sartor, for a respiratory complaint. Dr. Sartor did not file a report to any protective agency. After Bernardo's disappearance the following April, he would say to his wife a phrase that would later be quoted back to him in court. They arrest the kid. Chapter 3, the 24th of January 2014. In late November or early December 2013, the family's attorney, Santa Maria, sent an email, and the attorney's name was Marlon Balbon Taborda. The email went to the Consejo, to the office of the children's prosecutor. It forwarded the statement attributed to a former name identified in the case file as Elaine. The statement said that Bernardo had recently nearly been asphyxiated at home one night, that he had been seen wandering the streets, locked out, that the stepmother was old. It named witnesses. Taborda would later say, "We never received any feedback." The Consejo Tutelar's later defense, voiced by Counselor Rosani do Nascimento, was that the email had not been prioritized because Bernardo himself had not described mistreatment during the school visit in July. A second counselor, Deborah Granish, used a phrase that the procedural failure literature in Brazilian child protection would recognize at once. We only had the comments. On the 24th of January 2014, the school year barely begun. Bernardo himself walked into the Tres Passos courthouse alone. He had asked a school employee named Mateus to bring him there. He asked to see the judge. He was taken first to the judge of the comarca, who heard him briefly, and then to the prosecutor of the children's branch, Dena Marcia de Oliveira. Bernardo, 11 years old, spoke with the prosecutor for around 40 minutes. He described his stepmother in the terms he would have used among adults he trusted. He asked to live with another family. The prosecutor did not enter the conversation into the formal record. She would later concede that the content of those 40 minutes existed. No order of protection was signed. No removal was discussed. Bernardo went back to the house. Chapter 4. The 4th of April. On the 11th of February 2014, the family court of Tres Passos held a conciliation hearing between Bernardo and his father. The hearing was scheduled to address the boy's complaint. Psychological evaluations were not ordered. Removal was not discussed. The hearing was not formally recorded. Between the 24th of January and the 4th of April was 70 days. Across those 70 days, no protective custody order was signed, no mandatory child protection inquiry was opened. On the morning of the 4th of April 2014, Bernardo did not go to school. His stepmother told the household he'll be traveling with her to see a healer in the interior. He was given midazolam, dissolved in a soft on the pretext of preventing car sickness during the journey. The car took the road from Tres Passos east towards the Mico River near Frederico, Westphalen. It is around 80 kilometers of interior road, the kind that runs straight between fields and bends only at the river crossings, but on a rural property near the Mico River. A family acquaintance was waiting. Her name was Edelvenia Ruganovic. She was a nurse and one of Graciele's confidantes. What happened next, the case file describes once, and the episode will not narrate. Bernardo's body was placed in a vertical pit that had been prepared in advance. That evening, Leandro and Graciele attended the party in Tres Passos on the following Monday. Leandro saw patients as scheduled. A missing persons report was filed on the Saturday morning. It described Bernardo as not having returned from school. Chapter 5. The 14th of April. The initial police response was a wide search of the city. Posters were printed. Volunteers walked the parks and the river banks. The family gave interviews to the regional press. Leandro and Graciele appeared in the early television coverage, asking for help finding their son. Within days, the investigators of the Polícia Civil of Rio Grande do Sul had begun to follow other lines. Phone records placed Graciele's car on the road towards Prejudico Westphalia on the afternoon of the 4th of April. Edovania Urganovich was taken in for questioning on the 11th of April. Under interrogation, she confessed and led police to the property near the Miko River. Police excavated the site on the 14th of April 2014, 10 days after the disappearance. Bernardo's body was recovered from the pit. The autopsy identified midazolam in his liver, his kidneys, and his stomach. The cause of death was the combined sedative load. There was no struggle on his body. Within a week, Graciele had also confessed. Within 10 days, Leandro had been arrested. Edovania's brother, Evandro Virganovich, who had dug the pit days in advance, was the fourth person taken into. All four were in custody by the second week of May. Chapter 6. The investigation by the prosecutor's office in Tres Passos, in the opening statement at the eventual trial, would summarize the Evandro did it for money, the other three killed for pleasure. It is the architecture of premeditation that makes the 8-week silence of the protective network feel to anyone reading the file like a clock that everyone could hear. Graciele, as a nursing technician, had access to controlled medications. She would later be accused of having forged Leandro's signature on prescriptions for midazolam, but Edovania, with the property in Frederico, Westphalen, was in financial difficulty over debt. The Boldrinis were deaf. The Boldrinis were positioned to her brother Evandro, who lived nearby, was drawn in for the manual labor of the pit. Police would later argue, and the jury would accept, that the digging of the pit had preceded the crime by days, that the route between Tenente Portela and Palmitinho had been timed and rehearsed, that the medications had been prepared in advance. 8 weeks earlier, Bernardo had given the protective network a name and a location. He had volunteered the very piece of testimony that Proctoring considers a primary indicator. The network had no instrument designed to convert that testimony into custody. His grandmother's lawyer had emailed a report weeks before he walked to the courthouse. His school had been aware of hunger and isolation for months. His pediatrician had been aware, in the doctor's later words, of a situation of abandonment. Chapter 7. The trials. The criminal proceedings of the 4 defendants were the longest jury trial in the history of the judiciary of Rio Grande do Sul. The jury sat in Tres Passos from the 11th to the 15th of March, almost 5 years after the day on the Miko River torched. The presiding judge was Suceline Engler-Werle. The prosecution was carried by Ederson Vieira, Bruno Bonamente, Silvia Ins Jape. On the 15th of March 2019, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 4 defendants. Leandro Boldrini was convicted of quadruply qualified homicide, together with aggravated cadaver concealment and ideological falsity. His sentence was 33 years and 8 months. Graciele Ugulini was convicted of quadruply qualified homicide and aggravated cadaver concealment for 34 years and 7 months. Edovania Virganovic was convicted of triply qualified homicide and aggravated cadaver concealment for 22 years and 10 months. Evandro Virganovic was convicted of simple homicide and triply aggravated cadaver concealment for 9 years and 6 months. He was almost immediately granted conditional release. In December 2021, the Quarta Câmara Criminal of the Tribunal de Justiça do Rio Grande do Sul. It ordered a new jury trial citing procedural irregularities the way the prosecution had conducted his cross-examination. The Superior Tribunal de Justiça refused to overturn the annulment, but kept him in custody. The retrial sat in Tres Passos in March 2023. Over 4 days, Leandro was reconvicted of quadruply qualified homicide and ideological falsity. The cadaver concealment count this time was acquitted. The new sentence was 31 years and 8. In April 2025, Edovania Ganovic was found dead at the Penitenciária Feminina Madre Tertiae in Porto Alegre. The death was treated as a suspected suicide. She had only recently returned to a monitored semi-open regime. These convictions are real and they're stable. They are not the question this episode is about. Chapter 8, the Cascades. In the months following Bernardo's death, several lines of administrative review were opened in parallel with the criminal investigation. The Ministério Público do Rio Grande do Sul opened a review of the conduct of the Conselho Tutelar came under inspection by the Municipal Council and by the Regional Council of Guardian Council. The school, the pediatrician, and the family court each gave depositions that doubled as their testimony in the parallel review. Out of those reviews, several specific phrases entered the public record. The prosecutor on the unrecorded 30-minute conversation said the content was registered only in her mind and in her heart as a. The counselor Rosani do Nascimento said the email from the family's attorney had not been treated as a priority because Bernardo had not raised mistreatment directly during the school visit in July. The counselor Deborah Granish said we only had comments. The pediatrician Dr. Sartor said they harassed the kid. The school coordinator Simone Mahler and the school psychologist Denise Escher confirmed that the school had not filed any formal report. Reading sequence. The words do not describe a system that did not have the signal. They describe a system that received the signal in a form it did not have a procedure to act on. The Estatuto da Criança e do Adolescente, in its 2014 form, required mandatory reporting from health and education professionals. The lei de diretrizes e bases da Educação repeated the requirement. The threshold for action by the Conselho Tutelar in the doctrinal interpretation in force in Tres Passos was a formalized complaint with an identifiable signatory, an email from a Santa Maria lawyer summarizing the words of a former nanny did not in their reading. The threshold for action by the Ministerio Público was an open administrative process. The same email in the prosecutor's reading did not by itself trigger. The threshold for action by the family court was a request for psychological evaluation by a party withstanding. Bernardo, 11 years old, did not standing. Each professional had read their statute correctly. The system had read the child wrong. The procedural failure literature in Brazilian child protection has, for 2 decades, described the architecture in the same language. Agencies operate in isolation. There are overlapping competences. Communication fails. There is no effective coordination among the members of the network. Chapter 9 was reformed in May 2014, before the criminal investigation had even reached indictment. The federal chamber passed a bill that had been before it since 2010. The Senate approved it on the 4th of June. President Dilma Rousseff signed it on the 26th of June 2014. It became law 13,010 of 2014. The Lei Menino Bernardo, Tochna's popularly it became known as the Lei da Pomada, Tonto da. He amended the Estatuto da Criança e do Adolescente to establish explicitly the right of children to be raised without physical punishment or cruel, degrading treatment. The law is the most visible legislative response to the case. It is also read against the actual Cascade in Tres Passos and oblique one. The Boldrini household was not a household that needed the legal definition of corporal punishment to be tightened. It was a household whose dysfunction had been catalogued in writing by named adults across 4 institutions. The law that was passed in Bernardo's name addressed the cultural permissibility of physical punishment in Brazilian homes. It did not address the operational failure of interagency information sharing in Brazilian child protection. 7 years later, in March 2021, a 4-year-old boy in Rio de Janeiro named Henry Borel was killed in the apartment he shared with his mother and her partner. The case profile rhymed with Bernardo's pediatric visits, during which injuries were observed but no report was filed. A babysitter's messages kept in real time of bruises and a limping child. On the 24th of May 2022, the federal government passed law 14,344. The Lei Henry Borel, it created a category of urgent protective measures for children at risk of domestic violence, allowing a judge to order separation before any criminal proceeding is completed. Coda, the unresolved question. The Lei Henry Borel is the legal response that addresses the procedural fault Bernardo's case had exposed 8 years earlier. It is also a law whose operational reach depends on a network of guardian councils, pediatric clinics, schools, and family courts that have not been resourced to meet its requirements. The procedural literature in Brazilian child protection as it stands in the middle of the 2020s is not opinion. It is documented the description of an architecture that does not perform the function statute assigns it. It names the fragmentation of attributions among the Conselho Tutelar, the CRIAs, the CRAS, the Children's Prosecutor, the Family Court, the Public Health. It names the absence of a shared information infrastructure across those bodies. It names the legal threshold problem, the requirement of a formalized complaint, an identifiable signatory, and open the administrative process that the actual signal does not meet. Giussara Marlene Uglione died in Santa Maria in 2024, ages 76, Pasto. She had spent the last decade of her life as one of the most visible advocates of the Brazilian child protection reform debate. She had outlived her daughter by 14 years and her grandson by 10. The reforms she advocated for the operation of Rebuild, the interagency registered the definition of protective standing, were not passed in her lifetime. The maternal family in Santa Maria continues. They visit Bernardo's grave on his birthday, September, and on the anniversary of his disappearance in April. The system that received those signals is the same system in its architecture and in much of its personnel inventory that is receiving the equivalent signals right now from other children in other towns. The question is not who killed Bernardo Boldrini. The question is what the system would need to change to catch a case like his the next time the signals appear. This channel is called the Quiet Hill. We come back to the things people did and to the silences that grew around them. Subscribe, and the next one will find you. Until then, keep him in mind, Bernardo Uglione Boldrini, and the labor of every adult, named and unnamed, who is working to close the gap, his case opened.